I think it's awesome that the franchise is doing that and stepping up and taking ownership of, I guess, a problematic name, which is about, the Christian conquest of the Middle East historically and the slaughter of Muslims and the imposition of Christianity. So to me it makes good sense. I think the interesting question will be then, how do we spread that across different avenues in Aotearoa New Zealand, which is a colonised country? And, our European ancestors did, do the same thing to the Māori world here.
Yeah.
So how do we look at perhaps names that might be offensive or damaging to others?
If in doubt, just call them an animal. Right, like call them the Bobcats or something. If you are making a team from now on, just call them something. Just has no chance of being offensive to anyone.
I was like, where are we going?
Let's call them the pandas.
Yeah, exactly.
There is apparently a legend of a panther that is in the forest somewhere down Christchurch, or the South Island, so it could be called the Panthers.
I think they're doing it in America. I think certain places are getting statues taken down of racist old generals from the Civil War and whatnot. So I think it's important to own your history and review it. And people are like, oh, it wasn't me who did it, but I think you can take ownership for your group, as it were, and make historical apologies.
I can see both sides of the coin, though. Like, it is, for those people that have followed the Crusaders for years, it is a real kind of personal affront to them that, that they're suddenly going to have to change their team, their branding.
If that's the only thing you've got to complain about, you're pretty lucky.
Yeah, this is very true.
Right.
And we are largely very lucky in this country.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if they did change the name, and I'm open to all arguments at the moment, but if they did change the name, it's not going to be like it's going to dramatically change anyone's life.
It's not like the team's going to suddenly be really bad at rugby.
No.
Why don't know?
As a Blues supporter, I almost hope that it does mean that.
Psychological warfare.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is that a lot of the people who, for the last couple of weeks have just been completely affected by everything that has happened in Christchurch and have said, this is not us, this doesn't define us, are also the people who now seem disgusted at the proposal that they should somehow have to be affected by changing their rugby team's name.
Yeah, totally.
And do you think it proves that this is us? This is us.
I think
we have to actually accept that we have a culture here that has led to something like this happening.
Well, the pushback that Jack's talking about, I think, does highlight some of the closet racist beliefs that we might not consider that we hold until we're confronted like this,
So much of it is subconscious, isn't it? That, that white privilege and what have you, that we don't realise is there, or we haven't thought about it, and this perhaps is that time where we start recognising it. And we start going, oh, okay, hang on.
This is a real tangible example of something that we're going to have to start compromising on, or something that we might have to start giving up.
Yeah. I was at a training for Women's Refuge yesterday, and there's a point to this, and they were talking about we talk about history, HIS, and then they'd make a shift to call it her story, and we're talking about some of the historical developments of the suffragettes and the Women's Refuge movement here, and it really made me think that our language is quite patriarchal in construction, and that language shapes our reality. So I think shifting a name of a team like the Crusaders to something less militaristic is a positive step over time. Like, I think our future generations are going to be better served when we don't celebrate historical injustices without thinking about it.
I think at the very least, the combination of the name and the imagery of knights on horses with swords probably is going to change, and that's probably something that most Crusaders fans would accept as a reasonable development. Hey, we had Matt Vickers on the show this morning. He is, of course, the widower of Lucretia Seals, who died in 2015. She was a passionate campaigner for euthanasia rights up until her death. This is a really personal debate and conversation for people, and it seems to cut across political lines. More than 90% of the 38,000 submissions that have been received by the government in considering David Seymour's bill have been against euthanasia, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, Matt seemed to think that a lot of religious groups might have been responsible for some of that, but where do you guys stand on the issue?
I hate to agree with David Seymour, but
He does say a lot. There are a lot of things he says that are legitimate, right?
yeah, that's true. It's a fair point. But I tend to err towards agreeing with him on this. I watched my great-grandmother die quite painfully, my grandmother, my grandfather, and 2 of the 3 of them explicitly mentioned, I wish I could just take a pill and go to sleep and not have to go through this. So I definitely think under a very strict set of laws and checks and balances that the right to a peaceful death at your own timing and choosing is something that we should put on the table legally. I just hope that it doesn't become something that's abused in a society where the elderly are often disregarded, ignored, and sometimes might be seen as a hassle for families that are too busy to really care about them. And also
the important bit is getting the legislation right, making sure that it's robust. But for me, I just kind of think when you're offering legislation that is going to provide you with a choice, what's with all the steadfast opposition? If you don't believe in it, don't do it. It's like that with lots of different legislation, isn't it?
Your choice.
It's not forcing you to do it.
Yeah, it's like people who are opposed to abortion or things like that, and they want it to be a uniform moral acceptance in our broader society, whereas which I don't agree with. I think, given how we're quite a pluralistic culture, aren't we? I mean, we're endeavouring to be.
There are some people who are worried that this legislation could lead to people taking advantage of it, as you were saying. And, I mean, this is true. This could happen. I mean, people will always try and find loopholes to get around things.
And,
so it has to be robust, as you're saying. But
you need protections and checks and balances, because you don't want, your granddad's got a heap of money that I'm going to inherit. Let's emotionally abuse him and cajole him into signing into a document that means that he's going to take his own life.
I think the impact on doctors is something really important to consider as well. It's interesting to me that doctors and nurses, there seems to be a little bit of a split in their opinion, because usually in the medical fraternity, they're kind of uniform. But I think a lot of doctors feel uncomfortable with being charged with the responsibility of being I'm in a position to.
I almost feel like that the doctors have, because the doctors in this bill have to have sign-off on this, or a couple. I almost feel like the choice can't be at doctors, because doctors have to be saving lives, right?
What's the Hippocratic Oath?
It does.
So they have to save lives. So I almost feel like the choice shouldn't be in the medical community. It should be in the law community or in the family.
Or at the very least, make sure that their choice is built into the legislation for the doctors and the nurses as well. If they don't want to be involved,
This is the great irony, isn't it? It's the ultimate personal choice that is being effectively taken out of the hands of the person it affects.
Yeah, because when is it suicide and when is it...
when is it euthanasia?
Death, or euthanasia.
If you were terminally ill, would you want the right to take your own life?
What happens as well, if somebody might be older and not feeling great, but they are possibly depressed in a bad state, then they might choose to go, right now, I'm not happy, but they could be missing out on certain things that could actually make them happier.